The oldest son of one of America's most watched wilderness families was found dead in a Washington state river in the summer of 2026. Estranged from nearly everyone he had grown up on camera with, cut off by most of the people who raised him, and carrying accusations that the show itself had made his addiction worse. That man was Matt Brown, the eldest child of Billy and Ami Brown, the patriarch and matriarch of Alaskan Bush People. The Discovery Channel docudrama that ran for 14 seasons convinced millions of viewers the Brown family was living something pure and real, and then quietly fell apart after the man holding it all together died. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly when and why that family began to fracture, and why the split that happened on camera was only the surface of something much deeper. There was a version of the Brown family that America fell in love with. From the first episode in May 2014, Billy Brown and his wife Amy presented their 7 children, Matt, Joshua Bam Bam, Bear, Gabe, Noah, Snowbird, and Rain, as a unit unlike anything else on television. They called themselves the Wolf Pack. They lived off Chichagof Island in remote Alaska, or so the show framed it, building their own structures, hunting their own food, raising their children completely apart from modern society. The family even had their own dialect, a collection of phrases and terms that seemed to come from years of total isolation. Discovery Channel positioned the Browns as the last truly wild American family. By season 3, the show was pulling in millions of viewers per episode. But almost immediately, questions began circulating about how authentic that life actually was. Critics pointed out that the family's lifestyle was documented and staged in ways that rural off-grid life simply doesn't allow. Then, in 2014, state prosecutors in Alaska charged Billy Brown, Amy, and 4 of their 7 children with 60 counts of falsification and theft, tied to Alaska Permanent Fund dividend applications they filed between 2010 and 2013. To receive those dividends, you have to be an Alaska resident. The Browns had claimed they were. Prosecutors argued they weren't. Billy and his son Bam Bam pleaded guilty to 1 count each of second-degree unsworn falsification. They were sentenced to 30 days in jail, ordered to repay the dividends, and permanently barred from ever receiving them again. All charges against the rest of the family were dropped as part of the deal. Discovery Channel announced the show would not be canceled. The family kept filming, and if that was the first crack in the foundation, most viewers didn't notice. What they noticed instead was the eldest son, the one who seemed the most like Billy, starting to disappear. Matt Brown was the firstborn. He was the one who learned every skill his father taught, who wore that identity the loudest. On camera, he was the capable, energetic eldest, the one building things, problem-solving, making the wilderness look manageable. Off camera, he was battling something the show only began hinting at years into his run. In 2016, Matt spoke openly in an interview with People magazine about his relationship with alcohol. He described noticing himself spiraling. He said he had started drinking lightly and then it had grown. He said when he saw the problem forming, he didn't want to become one of those people who couldn't stop. But by that point, he already couldn't. He entered rehabilitation for the first time in 2016. He came back. He relapsed. Then, in 2018, 2 women came forward with separate allegations of sexual assault. Both claims described incidents that occurred just 2 days apart. Matt was alleged to have been heavily intoxicated during both encounters. He was never charged, but the allegations followed him. Shortly after, he entered the Betty Ford Center for a second round of treatment. The show never directly addressed any of this. His presence simply began to diminish. By 2019, he was gone entirely, having appeared in 79 episodes between 2014 and that year. Discovery Channel said nothing. His family said little. And then Matt Brown began speaking publicly about what he said had actually happened. In an emotional video posted to Instagram in April 2021, he claimed that members of the production team had supplied drugs to members of the family, a claim that, if true, would mean the show's environment had actively worsened his addiction. He also accused his father, Billy, of withholding money he had earned from the show, leaving him financially isolated while the family continued generating income from the series he had helped build. Whether those claims can be independently verified is unclear. What is documented is what happened next. Most of his family cut contact. And here's the part that changes everything about what you just heard. While Matt was navigating isolation, his father's health was deteriorating in ways that even the show hadn't fully captured. Billy Brown had been the gravitational center of everything. The Wolfpack concept, the philosophy of living outside society, the identity the show had built, all of it ran through him. And in February 2021, at his home in Washington state, Billy Brown suffered a seizure and did not recover. He died on February 7, 2021. He was 68 years old. The official cause listed cardiac arrest, coronary artery disease, emphysema, and complications from the seizure. Tobacco use was noted as a contributing factor. Bear Brown made the announcement publicly. In a statement posted to Instagram, he wrote that Billy had been their best friend, that he had lived his life on his terms, off the grid and off the land, and had taught them to do the same. Bear said the family planned to honor his legacy. Discovery Channel released its own statement calling Billy a trailblazer and expressing condolences. What the public tributes didn't capture immediately was what Billy's absence meant structurally for a family of 7 adult children who had been raised to operate as one unit, and who now, without the man at the center, had to figure out what they were independently. When he died, no valid will was found. According to legal filings that emerged in 2023, a $500,000 lawsuit had been filed against Billy's estate by a man named Mohan, who claimed a financial arrangement predating the show. Amy Brown was added as a defendant in 2023 in her capacity as executor of the estate. The court denied the estate's motion to dismiss. The lawsuit moved forward. For a family already dealing with Matt's estrangement, a show on uncertain footing, and the loss of the man who had led them, the legal exposure added another layer of pressure onto an already fractured structure. The show released its final episodes in December 2022. No cancellation was announced, but filming stopped. What happened after that is the reason this story spread across the internet. When a family loses its patriarch and the cameras stop rolling, what remains is just people. And the Brown siblings, stripped of the narrative frame that had defined them for 8 years, did not hold together. The first visible break came from Noah, the youngest of the Brown brothers, the one who had been 20 when the show began. In August 2024, Noah and his wife Rain filed a legal petition for an order of protection against his sister Rain. The paperwork alleged stalking. It alleged threats, including what was described as the presence of a firearm, causing substantial emotional distress. It alleged that Rain had made malicious and intentional threats. Noah and Rain requested that Rain be barred from coming within 1,000 feet of them, be required to give up all firearms, and be prohibited from posting anything about them online. Rain, whose legal name is Merry Christmas Catherine Raindrop Brown, did not file court paperwork in response. She reportedly addressed it publicly on social media instead. Court filings also referenced allegations of drug use, including methamphetamine and cocaine. Rain has not publicly confirmed any drug use. A judge ultimately denied the petition for a restraining order. But the damage to the family's public image, and to whatever remained of their private relationships, was visible. Noah and his wife Rain announced their own separation in January 2025. They had 2 sons together. Noah took to TikTok to tell followers he had been asked to leave the main property and was living in a guest cabin nearby. Then, in April 2025, Rain Brown and her husband Josiah Lorton were both arrested in Washington state on charges of burglary in the first degree, malicious mischief in the first degree, and criminal trespass in the second degree. Both pleaded not guilty. Both denied any wrongdoing. That same month, the same April 2025, Bear Brown and his wife Raven, who had married in January 2022, after a years-long on and off relationship, announced their separation. They had 3 sons together. Bear asked his followers publicly to be respectful toward Raven and not to be hateful. 1 month, 2 siblings with major legal or personal ruptures. A third with a publicized separation. A mother who had been hospitalized earlier that year in February 2025 with an undisclosed health emergency. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. While his siblings were navigating their various conflicts publicly, Matt Brown was living something quieter and more isolated. After leaving the show and his family's orbit, he had settled in a remote area of Loomis, Washington, not far geographically from North Star Ranch where his family lived, but worlds away from any involvement with them. Family sources confirmed to media outlets that most of the family had cut off contact with Matt years earlier, citing the impossibility of supporting someone through ongoing addiction struggles when repeated attempts had not helped. The only exception, reportedly, was his younger brother Gabe, and even those communications were described as infrequent. Matt had started a YouTube channel. He had begun documenting his life off-grid, sharing his recovery process with whoever was watching. He talked about his faith. He talked about sobriety. He presented himself to the public as someone who was still trying. What his public post didn't capture was how serious things had become. In late May 2026, a bystander reported a man matching Matt's description near the Okanogan River in Washington state, a man they believed was in distress. A search was initiated. A private search team, led by a man named Che Wilkerson Moore, took to the river by kayak. The search was physically difficult. The area was remote. The current was strong. Matt's clothing blended with the murky water. On May 37, 2026, the team spotted a brown jacket in the water several miles south of where Matt had last been seen. His body was recovered and brought to shore. Noah Brown, who was present with the search party, identified his oldest brother. Bear announced the death publicly on TikTok. His voice made clear this was not something any amount of estrangement had prepared him for. The Okanogan County coroner confirmed the findings in the autopsy report. Matt Brown's death was ruled a suicide. He had died from a single gunshot wound. Methamphetamine was present in his system at the time of his death. He was 43 years old. Bear addressed the estrangement directly in the days that followed. He pushed back against the idea that the family had simply abandoned his brother, saying the situation was more complicated than people realized. He also said he had never thought Matt would hurt himself. He had worried about an overdose. He had not anticipated this. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. Every family fracture has a decision buried somewhere near the beginning. For the Browns, there was not one decision. There were several, layered across years. But the one that set the trajectory for everything that followed was not dramatic. It was quiet. It was the decision Billy Brown made, or was presented with, in 2014, when Discovery Channel offered the family the platform that would make them famous. That decision was framed publicly as an opportunity to share their lifestyle with the world. But it required something in return: the transformation of a private, off-grid family identity into a television product. Every fight, every skill demonstration, every family moment now existed in service of a narrative that someone else was shaping. The show required the family to be the wolf pack. It required them to be unified, competent, self-reliant, and compelling. It did not have room for the complexity of Matt's addiction. It did not have a mechanism for protecting a young man who was struggling within a production environment that, according to his own account, was making things worse, not better. When Matt's problems became too visible to manage on camera, the solution was removal. The story just moved on without him. And Billy, the man who might have held some of that tension together, who might have been the bridge between Matt and the family after the show, died in 2021 before any of that reconciliation could happen. The $500,000 lawsuit against the estate, the sibling restraining order, the arrests, the separations, the death of the eldest son in a Washington river at 43. None of these things were inevitable, but they all connect back to the same fracture point: a family that was monetized and branded before it understood what that would cost them. One phone call, one conversation, that's all it took to change the direction of everything. In March 2025, Bear Brown addressed the question that fans had been asking for years: was Alaskan Bush People canceled? In an Instagram video, he said the official term was that the show was on hiatus. He explained that Discovery had gone through a major corporate merger and was still working through the aftermath. He said they were not filming right now. He said it was not canceled. Whether that remains true is uncertain. What is certain is that the show has not aired since December 2022. 14 seasons, 114 episodes, and then silence. Amy Brown, the matriarch, has remained at North Star Ranch in Washington. She survived a lung cancer diagnosis in 2017, a diagnosis that prompted the family's move from Alaska to Washington in the first place, so she could receive treatment. By 2018, her cancer had gone into remission. She has continued posting on social media through various health challenges, including a hospitalization in February 2025. Bear lives in Washington. He is raising 3 sons and navigating co-parenting with Raven, who has since announced a new relationship. Noah remains on or near the family property, raising 2 sons after his separation from Rain. Rain and her husband Josiah are working through their legal situation. Gabe has maintained the most private of all the siblings' lives. Bam Bam, Joshua, has stayed largely out of the public conversation. And Matt is gone. The family Billy Brown built, the one that was supposed to be the toughest unit in America, the people who needed no one outside themselves, is scattered across different addresses, different legal situations, different versions of a future that doesn't include the show that defined them. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. There is something specific about the Alaskan Bush People story that separates it from ordinary reality TV dissolution. Most shows about families eventually end. The family moves on. Sometimes there are divorces, sometimes there are feuds, sometimes the cast goes quiet and builds private lives. That's normal. What happened to the Browns is different because the show's entire identity was built on a premise of invincibility. The wolf pack didn't need the outside world. They had each other. They had their skills. They had the land. They were, by the logic of the show's marketing, better equipped than anyone for whatever life threw at them. What the cameras couldn't capture, or chose not to, was that those same children had been raised in an environment that discouraged engagement with institutions that might have helped Matt. Therapists, structured support programs, mental health professionals, the kinds of resources that require trusting systems outside your own family. The philosophy that made the show compelling was, for the eldest son, a structure that offered no safety net. Matt Brown talked about this in the years after he left. He talked about the gap between what the show presented and what life inside it had actually felt like. He wasn't the first person to tell a story like that about a reality TV production. But his version was specific, and it was detailed, and it came from someone who had been there from the very first episode. His death does not resolve those questions. The autopsy findings, the circumstances of his final months, the years of estrangement, none of it answers cleanly. Addiction is not a narrative. It doesn't follow the structure of a television episode where things build toward a resolution. What it does tell you is this: the decision the Brown family made in 2014 to let cameras into their lives and build a brand from their identity produced consequences that ran far deeper than any season finale acknowledged. And the eldest son bore more of those consequences than anyone. The story of Alaskan Bush People is not a story about a show ending. It is a story about what happens when a family's identity becomes a product, and what's left when the product is no longer viable. Billy Brown built something real in the belief that his family could live outside the rules the rest of the world followed. Whether that belief was genuine or performance is something only the people inside the family know. What is documented is that after he died, the structure that held them accountable to each other and to the image they had collectively chosen collapsed. 2 decades of filming, fractures, legal battles, separations, and 1 death in a Washington River later, the remaining members are still navigating what the wolf pack actually means without Billy and without Matt. Emmy Brown is still at the ranch. Bear is still posting. The show remains officially on hiatus. The question worth sitting with is this: do you think the decision to bring the Brown family onto national television ultimately helped them or hurt them? And if you were Billy Brown in 2014, knowing what you know now, would you have signed that deal? Leave your answer below.